did a hell of a job, man. Everybody made their weights and passed the conditioning test. We looked good, all but one guy.
He has been cut from an NFL roster more times than most players even make a roster in the first place. 11 times. Let that number sink in for a second. 11 times, Tom Kennedy has been told by the Detroit Lions that he's not good enough to stay. And 11 times, he has shown back up anyway. Heading into the 2026 season, this quietly ridiculous, almost unbelievable story is reaching an incredible new chapter because Tom Kennedy isn't just hanging around anymore. He might be walking into the most meaningful opportunity of his entire career. To understand why this man's story is so wild, you have to go all the way back to a kid growing up in Farmingdale, New York, who picked up a lacrosse stick at 6 years old simply because his older brother played. He fell in love with it, built a tight circle of friends who played together for over a decade. And by the time high school rolled around, Kennedy wasn't just a lacrosse guy. He was a legitimate two-sport athlete, good enough at both football and lacrosse that his high school coach actually pushed him to pursue both in college. That's an incredibly rare path, and it led him to Bryant University in Rhode Island, where he had a scholarship to do exactly that, play FCS football and Division I lacrosse at the same time. Here's where the story gets interesting, though, because football almost didn't survive that arrangement. As a freshman, Kennedy barely played football at all, stuck behind the depth chart, appearing in a grand total of a few JV games on Sunday mornings that nobody remembers. But when he switched over to lacrosse that same year, everything clicked. He ended up starting after just a few games and, by his own admission, had a much better experience. So he made the call almost every college athlete dreams about, but rarely actually makes. He decided to fully commit to lacrosse and let football go for a couple of years. And for a while, he says he genuinely didn't miss it. Football faded into the background, but something kept nagging at him. As time passed, that itch to compete on the football field again started creeping back in, and after his junior year, he reached out to his old football coach almost on a whim, just to see if there was still a door open. The coach didn't hesitate. Of course there was room for him. So heading into his senior year, Kennedy did something most college athletes never even attempt. He played both sports again, simultaneously at the Division I level. And in the process of sorting out his eligibility, he discovered something that would completely change the trajectory of his life. Thanks to the way his college career had unfolded, he actually had a technical 5th year of football eligibility remaining. But before he ever got back to a football field, lacrosse wasn't done with him yet. Kennedy's senior lacrosse season ended, and that summer, he went out and got drafted 26th overall in the Major League Lacrosse draft by the Boston Cannons. Scouts raved about him, calling him possibly the fastest player in the entire draft class, praising his football background and his straight-ahead speed, calling him hard-nosed and almost impossible to believe how fast he really was. This is a young man who was good enough to get professionally drafted in one sport, while simultaneously gearing up to go back and chase a different sport entirely at the collegiate level for one final ride. That 5th year of football turned into a legitimately impressive college career. By the time Kennedy wrapped up his time at Bryant, he had racked up 90 catches for nearly 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. Real, tangible production. The kind of numbers that should get NFL scouts at least a little curious. But here's the brutal reality of football at a small FCS program. Almost nobody came calling. Despite his production, despite his speed, despite everything he had proven on the field, NFL interest in Tom Kennedy was close to non-existent. This is where the story takes one of its most fascinating turns, because Kennedy's path into the NFL didn't come through a scouting department or a pre-draft workout circuit. It came through lacrosse. The Lions' defensive coordinator at the time had a son who played lacrosse at Bryant, and after Kennedy's pro day, that same coordinator reached out to the Lions front office with a simple message: give this kid a look. That connection, built entirely outside of football, is the reason Tom Kennedy ever got a rookie minicamp tryout with the Detroit Lions in the first place. He had a couple of strong days at that tryout and got signed shortly after. By his own admission, if that one relationship hadn't existed, his football career might have simply ended the moment he left Bryant. He wasn't chasing glory or a grand plan. He just didn't want to be over. From there, the story becomes almost a case study in perseverance. Kennedy made the Lions' 90-man roster ahead of training camp in 2019, got waived during final roster cuts on August 31st like so many players before him, but had done enough to land a spot on the practice squad. And then, just weeks into that very first season, an injury opened the door, and Kennedy, a man who 4 months earlier was an unknown invite to rookie minicamp, was suddenly elevated to the 53-man roster and dressing for his first NFL game. It happened so fast that, by his own description, there wasn't even time to sit back and appreciate how far he'd come. You just have to capitalize. That single elevation set the tone for the next 7 years of his career, which have included a jaw-dropping total of 33 separate roster transactions. 33 times, his name has appeared on a transaction wire. Cut, signed, elevated, waived, re-signed, and repeat. Most players would completely lose their mind under that kind of uncertainty. Kennedy's own explanation for how he survived it emotionally is almost disarmingly simple. Teams only have so many roster spots. Decisions have to be made, and it is what it is. You can dwell on it, you can be bitter about it, or you can just keep showing up. He chose to keep showing up, and showing up, in Kennedy's case, has meant becoming one of those rare players who coaches and teammates trust completely, even without a guaranteed roster spot to his name. Teammates have openly praised how reliable he is, how he never complains, how he simply does what's asked of him at practice, knowing that eventually his number will get called again. And when it does, he produces. There's a real moment of respect buried in how his own locker room describes him. Resilient, someone who has been cut and brought back over and over, and someone who understands that patience and preparation eventually get rewarded. Kennedy himself has been remarkably candid about the reality of it. In 7 years, he's only actually made the initial 53-man roster once. And yet he's still played in games across a ton of those seasons, largely because injuries happen, and when they do, he's ready. The moments when Tom Kennedy has gotten his chance have been nothing short of electric. There was the trick play off a fake punt that saw him throw the ball down the field for a big gain, drawing roars from the broadcast booth about a little razzle-dazzle nobody saw coming. There was a highlight reel catch, going up high to snag a pass inside the 10-yard line in his first game back 1 year. And more recently, there was a jaw-dropping kickoff return performance that had broadcasters practically shouting in disbelief. 3 kickoff returns for 120 yards in a single game. That's not a fluke. That's a player who has quietly turned himself into one of the more dangerous return specialists in Detroit, without ever getting the national attention that typically comes with that kind of production. And that brings us to right now, heading into the 2026 season, where Tom Kennedy's story might finally be reaching its most stable chapter yet. He enters camp as the longest tenured player on the entire Lions roster, which is a wild sentence considering how many times he's technically been cut loose by the organization. But this year, the door genuinely appears wide open. Detroit's 5th wide receiver competition became a real storyline after a rookie draft pick suffered a torn ACL, clearing a path for someone else to lock down that final receiver spot behind the team's top options. Kennedy is right in the mix, and he brings something the coaching staff clearly values: legitimate positional versatility, plus elite special teams value as a kick returner, having averaged nearly 28 yards per kickoff return and almost 17 yards per punt return last season alone. Those are the kind of numbers that make a coaching staff nervous about letting a guy walk, roster crunch, or not. When you ask Kennedy to reflect on this entire wild ride, the 33 transactions, the 10 or 11 times he's been cut, the years of grinding on a practice squad while most of the football world had no idea he even existed, his answer isn't bitterness. It's perspective. He's openly said that what carries him through it all isn't the accolades or the contracts. It's the respect of his peers, the guys in that locker room who know exactly how much unseen work goes into simply staying employed in this brutal business. He said flat out that this career hasn't been perfect, hasn't been easy, and honestly wouldn't be worth having if it hadn't come with real hardship and adversity attached to it. That's not a line from a highlight reel. That's a genuinely earned philosophy from a man who has lived it over and over again. So as Detroit Lions training camp rolls forward into 2026, keep an eye on Tom Kennedy, because this might be the year his incredible underdog story finally gets the spotlight it deserves. A two-sport athlete who almost gave up football completely. A pro lacrosse draft pick who came back for one final football season on a fluke of eligibility rules. An undrafted long shot who only got his tryout because of a relationship that had nothing to do with football scouting. And a man who has been cut over and over and over again, only to keep clawing his way back onto this roster because he simply refuses to let it be over. If this story moved you even a little bit, do us a huge favor. Smash that like button, drop a comment telling us what you think Tom Kennedy's role looks like this season. And if you're not subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. We are so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers here on Detroit Scope, and want to say a genuine thank you to the first 100 of you who have already subscribed and helped us get this far. Every single subscriber helps us keep telling stories like this one. We'll see you in the next video, Lions fans.